Okay, you're alive. Hello. Hello, everybody. This is Dale Walsh, and welcome to Straight, Sane, and Sober for another week. Thank you very much for attending, and we love to have you comment on the comment board. And today we have Colleen Ladwig, who's a serial entrepreneur and the mother of two adult and successful ADHD sons. So we're going to talk about her journey as a mother and also her journey is through the world of business. So welcome to the show, and as soon as we get this done, we'll be right back. Hi there, I'm Dale Walsh, the poetic warrior for the mental health warriors, and we're delighted to have with our show today Colleen Ladwig. Thank you. Welcome, Colleen. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast.
You're welcome. It's actually a TV show. It's beyond a podcast. So we're very fancy here. So uh, but I always start. I'm making it a tradition for me to start with one of my poems, and this one is called "Journey of My Earthly Quest." You have taken me into the zone of oblivion of joy, because you've accepted me as your only man, not boy, for which I thank you as lover you always envisioned, even as you give your beloved son and earthly father a sweet role of dedication I am divinely called to fulfill. With the devotion in my heart I've now at last satisfied, having found your passion enticing me to live forever, and the happiness I now feel reflected from within is neither delusion nor just an ephemeral passing fad, for to your child I intend to become conscientious dad. And I am supernaturally blessed to have found your beauty, for you are undeniably a realized woman, not a mere cutie, ready for a brief romantic fling with a guy hoping to create a partner who will be faithfully in love with his whole being, whose amour will lead him to drive confidently to eternity. In fact, a brief nanosecond in the mind of unique universal God, who with foresight and wisdom arranged our sacred meeting one day in May, a week before I reached age of retirement, though you have ignited within me the deep urge to provide for you too a life of abundance for you long before I have died. So that's called Journey of My Earthly Quest. I hope
I love
people
that.
enjoy. Thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Colleen. I'm not going to steal your thunder by talking about your 21 businesses that you've started, but and I know you've had like a real uh, journey with your sons with the ADHD and everything. So why don't you just give us a brief summary of what's going on with you?
Well, thank you very, very much. I, I was born and raised pretty humbly, and I grew up on a farm, and I got the love of horses right away. My very first horse, when I was about 18 months, was a chocolate lab, and I rode it when I was about 18 months old because I thought it was a pony. And then when I was 3, I actually got a real Shetland pony. And so our farm was in Skagit Valley, Mount Vernon, Washington. And I've stayed in Washington my whole life, where I raised my 2 boys. And one of them had ADD and one had ADHD. So if you know anything about either one of those 2 diagnoses, um, they're very difficult. And to have one child with one and one with the other, um, you know, they're both in their 40s now, and they, at that time, didn't know very much about ADD or ADHD. And so basically, the common thing to do was just to give them Ritalin, which is basically just straight meth. And so a lot of the kids in that age group, especially men, boys then, were, starting in kindergarten on up, have become meth kids, and they're still on drugs, which is very unfortunate because that whole generation has now resorted to meth or worse, and they wonder why we have such a mental health crisis on our hands. And I believe that it really started in that time frame. Now, some of the kids, I believe, like my two sons, um, it's more generic. My whole family, all the generations back, can be shown to have ADD or ADHD. So it's very genetic in our family. Whereas I think with some, I think they just got that label because they were very hyper or they were very non hyper. So if you were ADD, then of course you were very hyper. You were running around the classroom. The teacher couldn't control you. And what you find with ADD and ADHD children that are truly ADD and ADHD is they have very high IQs. And so they can really outsmart any program that you try to put them through. And so that's very hard to try to put them in any kind of control groups to say, okay, well, if they do this, you should do that. It just doesn't work. And so we had a very hard time in our family. My husband was military and gone all the time. And so it was pretty much me as a single mom, primarily because he was gone. And I did have my family around, which did not understand at all about ADD or ADHD. My grandparents did, which was helpful. But it was very hard because you had one set of rules for one child and a completely different set of rules for the other child. So they were in counseling, and it ended up that they were hospitalized most of their adolescent life. So both children were at Seattle Children's Hospital, and my youngest one ended up being in Fairfax Psych Hospital for a considerable amount of time. And that just doesn't work. But they didn't have any
I'm
other
sorry,
ways to try to control them.
just so we can get an idea. When your son went to Fairfax, how old was he?
5.
He was so basically this has been with him from the very beginning of his life, right? Or,
Right. Correct. Yeah.
because you said when you were talking about adolescence, and so I figured it was like 13, 14 when he went to Fairfax. But you're saying now, so he went to the Seattle hospital before Fairfax, and then
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
well
For
continue.
about 6 months.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's a very fascinating story. I just wanted to like get the time frame right. So
Good.
go on.
Thank you. Yeah. So it was like when he was about 5, and then for quite some time. And then he got to come home for a little bit for what would be summer break. And then it was like that didn't work. And so then he ended up having to go to Fairfax. And this is my younger son. And then he ended up getting to come home for a while. And then he was in special ed at school to try to keep him with lower numbers in a classroom. So it would be like 2 teachers to 5 kids. But that still wasn't very successful. So primarily he was mostly, in the hospital situation. My older son, he was what we always called, had the, horrible cloud over his head. Everybody was out to get him. Everything, happened to him. He was very, very depressed. Couldn't get him out of it. And then, so he was hospitalized a lot as well. And then when he turned 16, he got hit by a hit and run driver and damaged his brain severely and was in a hospital in Montana for a year to try to retrain his brain to function. And he's doing better. He's functioning as an adult and doing pretty well. He's married and he's doing pretty well. My younger one has still got challenges. Yeah.
Wow. So, uh, so didn't you tell me that that the son who got hit by the car, it like rattled his brain and like gave his brain like out of alignment with his skull or something? Do
Yes.
you
Yes.
remember
What
that?
happened was they didn't realize my oldest son was like, his personality was like, warm, fuzzy, cuddly bear kind of personality. And after the accident, he was like, just started getting mean, violent at school, just totally out of character. We kept taking him to doctor after doctor after doctor, and they're like, "Well, he looks fine," and it's like, "Well, but he's not acting fine. He's getting in trouble at school. He got expelled from school. The teachers were all like, 'We don't understand. He's never exhibited this before,' and he was getting mean at home." And so finally, a doctor in our region reached out to a special brain doctor in California, looked at all of his x rays, CAT scans, MRIs, and noticed that in his skull, his brain had rotated 10%. And so, in doing that, it's very, very rare. He was exhibiting the exact opposite of what he should be. So if he touched something that was cold, it was hot to him. And so everything was exactly opposite. So he had to go to a hospital in Mountain Home, and he was there for a year. And they had to basically retrain him, everything, because as he progressed, while he was at home before he went there, he degraded down to where he couldn't talk, he couldn't tie his shoes, he couldn't do anything, couldn't feed himself, nothing. And so they had to retrain him from ground up as if he was an infant just being born. It was
And
horrible.
what age was this for him?
16.
Wow.
And we were not allowed to talk to him as parents for the first 6 months because they said that if we talked to him, then he'd want to come home and it would undo all the wiring that they were trying to do to fix everything.
Right.
And so, as a parent, it was very, very difficult. And so, the very first time we talked to him, that's exactly what happened. It was like, get me out of here. I don't know why I'm here. Get me out of here. You don't love me. Why am I being shipped away? It was horrible as parents to try to do and put up with that. And so, as well as still trying to put up with an ADD child at home.
Right.
And so it ended up that our youngest son ended up moving out and living with another person. And then they tried to raise him for a while. And that worked for a little while.
So, maybe you can. I've always been like sort of like befuddled or bewildered by the difference between ADD and ADHD, and I mean, and I also I think you're like the first person or that's had like uh, a loved one be hospitalized. I mean, people say, "Oh, you just got ADHD." Well, you just got to concentrate better. You got it's they say it's something that's simply solved, and but with your two sons. Now, was your oldest son ever hospitalized for his ADHD or?
It was both sons, but my youngest son with ADD was hospitalized the most. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
he had it the
So,
worst.
so how can you enlighten us about the difference between ADD and ADHD?
Okay, the ADD is your evil Knievel kind of kid. He's off the edge. He's 1 foot off the edge all the time. He's the kid who's got the pencil in class and flipping it. He's
Right.
the one who quickly gets, the paper in school done. This test is going to take 20 minutes or 10 minutes, and he's got it done in 5, and he's going to get an A on it. Um, and then he's fiddling in his desk or on his phone or whatever, driving the teacher nuts. because it's already done. He doesn't know what else to do. And he's told to sit there and be quiet, which is impossible. That can't
Right.
happen. They don't know how to do that. So when they're really little, there's lots of techniques. There's like, okay, Billy or Susie or whoever, you can go to the back of the room and rearrange the books by color or by author or, whatever. There's little tricks you can do. I
Right.
remember myself having ADD. I always got sent to the library, and I didn't know why, but it was like, oh, the librarian needs you to help,
Right.
put the books away. And it was like, oh, so I always thought it was a special privilege to be good, get your stuff done, and then you could go to the library, but it was basically to get me out of the classroom, to keep from disrupting the classroom.
Right. So that's ADD, you say, and
Yeah,
what's
ADD. Yeah.
what's
And
ADHD?
normally, ADD and ADHD, usually it's the bigger percentage is in the male, but it can be in the females too. Like I have ADD. I know I do. I've been diagnosed with it. But
Right.
so there are some girls that have it. So it's not like it's just in the male line. But usually, if you dig deep enough, it's usually genetic if it's really severe.
Right. So yeah, as I said, I never heard of anybody being hospitalized for any of these conditions. So on the other hand, what does ADHD? I mean ADD
Okay.
because it's evil
So
Knievel.
so usually with someone with ADHD, they are very quiet, um, and so severely that it's like the world's out to get me. Um, they're the kind of kid that just stuff happens. So, like for instance, a child would be in a classroom and they're sitting in the middle of the classroom. There's 20 kids. A teacher would love that. I better say 30 kids. So there's 30 kids in the classroom. The child is sitting in the middle of the classroom and on the right side, and something happens way to the back of the room on the left side. And you know what happened over there, but the child that's sitting on the right side in the middle gets blamed for it. And it's like, it's really obvious that there's no way that child could have done it. No way,
Right.
impossible. But yet that child gets blamed for it. And it's like, really? How did Joey or whatever get blamed for it? And then yet it goes to the extreme that he'll get suspended from school for it. And it's like,
Right.
huh? How come that other child who everybody knows did it gets away with it constantly, and yet, my child Joey, supposedly whatever, who wasn't even in that section of the classroom, is getting blamed for it and is now being, ridiculed or out of the classroom or whatever. And it will
Right.
constantly happen, and it's like, or like you go to, back then it was really popular to go to fast food restaurants. If you're good, we'll go to Burger King or McDonald's or whatever. And so it would be like, okay, everybody's like leaving at the same time. Another family's in front of you or behind you. And the little girl gets splashed on and her little tights get mud on them. And it's like, we were ahead of you. How could we have done it? Justin didn't do it, and yet Justin will get blamed. The family makes a big scene. And it's like, look, her little brother did it. It's pretty obvious. He was right next to her. We were ahead of you
Right.
and already off the curb, and yet you're blaming, my son on it. It's like, that's impossible. You know, rewalk the steps, and it's like, huh. So, and then it's like, Mom, I always get blamed. I'm not even there sometimes. He'd not even be in an event and still get blamed.
Right.
And so it's like, huh. And so it's kind of like almost having a magnet on your head and, kind of being blamed for everything.
But it's also sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy because if you think you're going to be blamed for something and then you are blamed for everything,
Exactly.
it just reinforces your belief.
Right. Right. And until you can get over that, it doesn't quit. And it takes a long time for a child because they're like, well, I'm going to be blamed for it anyway. So, you know,
Right.
and they get so
Well,
tired of that. They want just out of the classroom anyway. So it's like, okay, I'll just take the blame. And at least I don't have to put up with the classroom.
right. Wow. One
So,
thing on a human level I've been thinking, Colleen, is especially with you and having ADD yourself, it must have been very heartbreaking to like go through all this. I mean, it'd be heartbreaking for anybody to go through this stuff, but it must have been like compounded with your ADD, and did you ever like have like times of like severe guilt or anger or that you had to get over yourself?
well, let me take a quick sip of water.
Sure.
I think the one time that I remember the most is when one of the kids were pretty young, and I went to the doctor, and the kids are smart. I mean, they're really smart. They know when to behave and they know when to act up. And so I went to the doctor because one of them had been really acting up, and I needed some help. And I went to the doctor, and we weren't in the doctor's office 10 minutes. And the doctor started immediately on, well, I think they're just fine. I think mommy needs help. And I just exploded. And I was like, no, you don't seem to get the picture here. And they're like, well, I just think mommy's stressed. And I'm like, yeah, mommy is a little stressed. However, mommy right now needs to use the restroom. And so I started to walk out of the room. And the doctor goes, well, aren't you going to take your child? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm going to let my child stay with you for, 10 more minutes while I use the restroom. And he's like, well, no. And I'm like, yeah, we'll see if he can keep up the charade for 10 more minutes while he's with you. And he's like, oh, no, no, no. And I'm like, yeah. And I walked out of the room. And then he's like, and he called the nurse in. Well, sure, the kid can't, stay good for 20 minutes. So then, he acted up a little bit. I came back and the doctor's like, well, he's just mild. And I said, well, that's okay. No problem. I said, because I'm going to leave him with you for overnight and I'll come back and get him tomorrow. And then we'll see if mommy has a little problem or my son has a little problem. Then you can decide. And he goes, well, no, no, no. And I said, no, I'm dead serious because you seem to think that it's my problem. And so I said, we'll let you get a little clearer picture here. And then he goes, well, I think you probably need to be seen, by a few more doctors for evaluation. And I said, yeah, probably. So can I get a referral? Because it took that to get his eyes open enough to be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, maybe there is a little problem here. And maybe it isn't mommy.
Right. So it was your son who was saying, yeah, I think mommy has a problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So it is difficult. And it's difficult to have two children in the household with issues and specifically opposite issues. So if you got one on one end, one on the other end, then they bounce off each other and it's horrible. It's just horrible.
Right.
It's just, I can't tell you. Yeah.
So what tactics or what strategies, or I don't know what the right word is, but how did you like learn how to, I don't know if control's the right word either, but how did you learn to cope with the situation? I mean, you having ADD yourself, and having two sons who are so severe, who are hospitalized, not necessarily because of the ADHD or whatever, but because of the getting run over by a truck or by a car, and so how did you learn the coping skills to like be able to raise your sons in a way where they're now productive adults?
That's a great, great question. And surprisingly, very few people ask that. But I think my grandmother said it best because she saw right away what was going on. And she just said, Colleen, just love them and love them the best way that you can. And by doing that, they will know you and love you. And with that love coming through, the Lord will help you do the best you can. And I clung to that their whole life and my whole life.
That's well that's one of my first recommendations for my clients is just be patient and love and faith with
Right.
your schizophrenic loved one. Because love and love and having love for your loved one and then having faith that things will work out, I think is like very important because at least with schizophrenia, I don't know if you experience this, but uh, I call my clients the forgotten victim, the families of schizophrenics, the forgotten victims of mental illness because the children or the loved ones usually have like a whole team, a psychiatrist and a social worker and a psychologist and stuff like maybe even a nurse or two, but the families are like left out in the cold and because of HIPAA and everything. I mean, I don't have any real opinion about HIPAA, but because of confidentiality laws, a lot of times they're like completely excluded from the therapeutic process that their loved ones are going through, and that leads to frustration, but it also leads to like a misunderstanding because ultimately, unless the loved one, a family member knows what the loved one's going through, they aren't going to be able to really communicate with what no matter how much they love.
Right. I totally 100% agree with you. It makes it very difficult. And only those providers who are like willing to semi cross the line to say, hey, this is kind of what's going on, week to week or whatever, every 2 weeks or what have you, a couple times a week to say, hey, we're making progress. This is kind of what we're going over. Here's what I suggest you try to work on or what have you. Then you're able to kind of cohesively work together, and that's very effective. In all levels of communication and help with whatever's going on, from an infant to an aged relative, wherever you are in the mix. And so I'm 100% hearing what you're saying, and that's really true. And I think regardless, there's a real spiritual aspect to that, regardless of, who your spiritual being may be. Mine happens to be the Lord, but yours might be something else, and I'm willing to accept that. But, you know, don't try and take the Lord away from me. So,
Right.
everyone can have their higher being. I'm okay with that. But the Lord for me, um, I've been intuitive since I was born, and the Lord speaks through me a lot to other people. And I have that almost daily. I'm not one who can just, snap my finger and ask for things and be like, oh, here's what he wants for you. Other people have that ability, and thankfully they do. But I have the Lord speaks through me all the time for different situations, and it just comes when He decides, which is totally fine with me. But I've had that since I was very little, and I'm very grateful for that. So,
I think you bring up a very important point. Is that when dealing with any mental illness or even just like during the day, day-to-day life, the stresses and everything, it's very important to have like faith in a power greater than you. However you call it, whether you call it source or universe or God or the Lord or anything. And
right,
I think that I'm sure that had like a very positive effect on you and trying to deal with the trials and tribulations that you've been through. And I really respect that. And um, did you transmit that sense of faith to your sons? Because I'm sure it would have helped them if you did.
right, yeah,
But so I'm just like amazed at like what a great mother you've been, and I mean, especially you said your husband was in the military, so that was, so you basically were raising them as a single mother. But when did you first get an intimate? I mean, you said that your youngest was hospitalized at the age of 5. So how did you know or sense that there was something? When and how did you know that something was like off kilter first with your sons?
Well, he was really hyper right away. And by the age of 3, he could take off we lived in an old farmhouse. And so the bedroom doors were solid wood. They weren't the plastic little veneer doors. And he was able to get the hinges off and take the door off. And because I would be like, try to put him in timeout in his room. And so he'd just take the hinges out and move the door at 3. I knew then I was in big trouble.
So there are two other aspects that I want to examine. We have like half our shows over, but I just want to I want to talk about your serial entrepreneurship too. But there are two points that you brought up that I think are worth dwelling on a little bit. And the first is, you say that people with ADHD and ADHD tend to have like a very high IQ. You wanna
Yes.
you want to expostulate on that a little bit?
Well, we've done a lot of research, and so is Children's Hospital, which is one of the um, top children's hospitals in the US. And they've done a lot of research and found that children with ADD and ADHD have very high IQs. And they're not sure exactly why, but I mean, they may know now. I haven't been right on it in the last few years, but it's just that they do. I know my own dad who had ADD, my grandpa did too. Their IQs were off the charts. But with that, their common sense, was like very low.
Right,
So were they high IQs in everything? No, nobody is. But where it comes to like math and science and all those kinds of things, couldn't touch them. They're just sky high. Now I've got a granddaughter, and from my youngest son who's got ADD, she's the same way. She's got ADD, super intelligent. This She just turned 14 in November, and her Christmas vacation, she had already been recruited for college and spent her whole Christmas vacation at the college she wanted to go to with the staff from the college recruiting her. And I'm like, she's 14, but
right,
she's doing 3 grade levels higher of all of our schoolwork and homework.
right.
So they're like, hey, we're ready for her. So next year, she can be going to college.
Wow,
I
that's
mean, because
inspiring,
her IQ is so
but
high.
scary.
Yeah.
That's inspiring as well as scary, right?
Hmm.
And then
So
so
she's been really smart since day one. We knew that. But we've kept her back because, to be kind of with her own age group. But the teacher she's in a special school, have just said, hey, work at your own pace. But, she just outpaces them. And it's like, okay, give me more, give me more. And she just does the work. But now it's like, oh my gosh, she's going to be going to college. It's like, all right.
does she have any life ambitions that she expresses?
Um, she loves her church, and she's really into fitness. And so she's all of her spare time, she's either at church or she's at the gym. And she actually works at the gym now. And she's got a couple of mentors from the gym. One of them, the kind of like her surrogate grandparents. One is a chiropractor that teaches fitness. And then the chiropractor's husband is a fisherman. So all the summer she goes out fishing on the big fishing boats. And so she knows everything about fishing. So she goes out and catches the big 100-pound fish and reels them in. And so,
Wow.
the world is her oyster coming up.
Yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing. So,
So I'm really proud of
and
her. She'll be able to do what she wants to do. And she's real cute. She's real tall. And, you know, she's a cute little munchkin, but yeah. But, she'll have to keep her ADD in check.
right.
But
So
yeah.
the other point you brought up that I wanted to examine was the whole drug issue, and how
Oh
you
yeah.
said that you feel that like part of the mental health crisis we're in was begun when your kids were young and they were just what was it, Adderall or no, Ritalin, right? Ritalin
Yeah.
was
Ritalin, which is
the drug
basically straight
issue.
meth. Yeah.
Right.
They didn't tell us that at the time, but basically that's what it was. Yeah. When
And
you
it's very
actually pull it
addictive
down.
too, right?
I'm sorry.
It's very addictive.
Oh, yeah. It's very addictive. Yeah. And that's what they
Well,
gave all the kids during that time. Everybody had to be on Ritalin to get back into school across the nation. It was widespread. Yep. Your kids had to get, if they were acting up, they had to be on Ritalin to get back into school.
well,
Drug of
so
choice.
so
It's
the
kind of like the
basically,
pandemic now. You have to get the vaccine. That's how it
right,
was with Ritalin. Yeah, it's horrible because now all those kids in that age group, they're all addicted to drugs. All of them. Very few escape that. And that whole generation are the ones now that have all the mental illness, that are all the homeless ones, that are causing all the trouble with BLM, that, I mean, we have it right here in Seattle. We can't get rid of all the homeless people. They're the ones with all the rights and they can park wherever they want. They can do all the tent cities and, they want this and they want that and they want to be left alone and they take over all the parks and, all the ball fields and they leave needles everywhere, so the private citizens and kids can't use anything. So, I mean, we have it in
right,
our own backyard. We have it right where I live too. It's not as bad
right.
as Seattle and Tacoma, but those are two big cities. But yeah, it's
Wow.
crazy. But it's everywhere, at least in the States. I mean, we have it in our big, down in California. We have it in Texas. We have it in New York. We have it in Florida. All the major big, you know, states. It's a major problem. Oregon, yeah. And I know it's worldwide a problem. It's not just the U.S. Drugs are a major problem everywhere,
Right.
and homelessness. But they're not going at it, in my opinion, properly because what they need to do is they need to fix the problem, and they need to take all of those people. Um, and I use that term, lovingly, but they need to provide them homes, in an area, whether that's tiny homes or what have you, and get them services and help get them off of drugs and make sure that they are provided for. And then they won't be homeless. And then they won't be disturbing the peace and having garbage everywhere and people afraid of them. Most of those people that are homeless aren't necessarily druggies. A lot of
Right.
them have been displaced, whether through job loss or divorce or whatever, um, family kicking them out. I mean, there's just a ton of reasons, but it isn't just because they're druggies. And if people would actually find out the real reason they're there, they would know that, but they don't. They just throw them under one umbrella and say, oh, they're druggies. They're homeless. That means they're on drugs. And that's not necessarily the case. And so
Right.
they just throw money at different programs and say, oh, well, we'll just give this much money out to this program. And then it doesn't, they've spent billions of dollars and it's not any better. And it's like,
Well,
it's just money wasted.
well, I think of two things. One is the old, I think it's a Chinese with proverb that says, uh, teach a man that give a man a fish and he'll eat for a night, but
Right.
teach him the fish and he'll never starve. So
Yeah,
that
exactly. Yeah.
and so I guess what you're proposing is that we get to the bottom of the drug problem rather than just treating the symptoms, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what they do here is they're like, oh, in this little district right here where all the rich people live, oh, we don't want homeless there because that's going to bring the prices of homes down. So they do a mandatory sweep and say, oh, you guys all have to move by Friday. And then they go in and move them. So then they have to go somewhere else and piss off the neighbors over there.
Right.
Yeah, which doesn't solve the problem. Yeah. So, but that's a whole nother topic.
Right. Well, we have about 20 minutes left, so I'd be very interested to hear about your story of your sons and and meth and Ritalin and intelligence. That's all fascinating. I'd like to turn now to your own journey to the business world and tell us a little bit about your growth as a businesswoman. I think you told me that you've started 21 companies in your time.
Well, let me give you a quick spin on that. So, um, when I was little, starting at about age 3, I used to always get to go spend time with my grandma. My mom was a single mom, and so she was having to work. So my sister and I got to spend a lot of time over at the farm with my grandma and grandpa. And my grandma was I would say not necessarily ADD, but she was always pretty busy. We were always very involved in our church, and she was always kind of I would just say, the head of everything. There was a committee, she was on it. And so we were always baking. That was just kind of that era back then in the 60s and 70s. And we were always baking for the potlucks. We were always, if people were sick back then, you always baked up cookies or goodies to take to them. And at the holidays, you always made tons of cookies and stuff to take to other people and to neighbors. You didn't really give cards back then. You gave a plate of cookies. That's what you did to all the neighbors and to other people at church. And so I still have pictures. Jill, I have to get you a picture of that at some point, but I have
Sure.
pictures that my grandma had her whole counter full of cookies. And then below that was a little coffee table that she had. And that was mine. It had a little tablecloth on it. So she would put trays of cookies down there. And what we would do is we'd have all these little sugar cookies, and then we would put icing on them, like a thin,
Right.
just icing. And then back then, the big thing was to sprinkle colored daiquiris on them. And then you could put little dots on them and make all kinds of little animals, or you just made them really, really cute. And so that was my job. She baked the cookies. And of course, when I was 3, 4, and 5, I got to decorate. So
Cool.
I became the really cool little decorator. So that's kind of how I got started, because at Christmas time, I would do probably 1,000 or more little cookies. And I was good at it. And the people at the church were like, oh, we only want the ones Colleen decorated. And so that really got to my head. So it was like, oh, Colleen, the little cookie decorator. And so as I grew up, it was just something tradition. I always helped my grandma, and then I learned to bake, like pies and cakes and all kinds of stuff. I just kind of graduate up. Well, by the time I turned 16, my grandma had decided that she was going to take me down to Olympia, which is down south in Washington, to get my first business license. Well, as habit, 16-year-olds aren't allowed to have a business license, much less a woman get a business license.
Now,
Well,
what year? I'm sorry. What year was this?
I was going to get a business for bakery and catering.
No, but what year?
I was 16.
But
So 1972.
oh, okay, 1972. Okay, that's what
Yeah.
I was looking for.
So I was 16, but we'd already traveled, like 5 hours or more to get to Olympia. And my grandma's not used to getting a no. And so I learned a couple lessons that day. One, you don't tell my grandma no, that a no just means not yet. And so we stayed until we got a yes. So I learned that day that no just means not yet. You just wait and keep rephrasing the question until you get a yes. So I never worry about getting a no. It's always going to be a yes. And then the question of me being 16 and a woman, it was like, well, if you actually look at the law, it didn't say that a woman couldn't do it. It didn't actually say that. And it didn't actually say that I couldn't be 16. So in their own words, they had to eat them. And my grandma let them eat their words. So I left there with my business license for a bakery and catering license at 16. And we drove home and had dinner on the way home. So I learned a couple valuable lessons that day. And so I had my license and I immediately started baking cakes and figured out very quickly that little birthday cakes don't make you very much money. So I immediately jumped to bigger wedding cakes. So the bigger wedding cakes were where the money was at.
Right.
So I made a deal with our local bakery because they had horrible cakes. They had the best donuts in the world and they did the best breads, but their cakes were horrible. And the owner knew it. And so I made a deal with her. I said, you know what? I will promote your bakery because it was the only bakery on the island where we lived. And I said, but I want you to recommend wedding cakes for me. And so we made a deal. And so anytime someone came in for a wedding cake, she gave them my card. And they were just paper little cards. And so I went into the wedding cake business big time. And I was doing, in my prime, I was doing like 8 to 9 wedding cakes a weekend. And I was doing big catering jobs as well. And so that's how I got my start. And as it progressed, because we were out on an island, people wanted, oh, my relatives are flying in. Is there any way you could help me with that? Can we get lodging? Can we get air tickets? You know, can you get them things to do? So my business started exploding in other areas I didn't even imagine. We started doing invitations. We started doing dresses. We started doing tuxedos. We did wedding dresses. And it just went on and on and on. We bought limousines. We had a limousine company. We worked with a florist. We bought out a florist. So it just went on and just exploded. And so that's how you can stack businesses and have multiple businesses all work together. And not everyone can do that. A lot of people are like, I could barely do one. And that's okay. No problem. But that's how I built up 21 businesses. And I had my own candy shop. A lot of people remember during that time in the early 80s, I had in old downtown, I had a great chocolate shop it was an ice cream parlor and homemade chocolates. We did all the dipping of chocolates. That was really wildly successful. That was great. We loved that shop. And the girls were in there dipping chocolates during the day. And we had our own fudge factory in there, made our own fresh fudge every day. We had like 30 flavors of fudge. I mean, it was so fun. The girls got to make whatever flavor of fudge they wanted. And we just throw ingredients in and it'd be like, oh, this is great. I love this one. And so anyway, and the one thing I did that helped make us really super successful is you have to treat your employees like family, like the family you love. It's like you can't treat them like, quote, employees. You need to treat them like family. Like you really love them. And they'll stick with you forever. My favorite employees now have some of the top jobs in Washington, here in Washington State, and they still love me. And that's so heartwarming to me because I can reach out to them and talk to their owners of those companies they work for. And it's like, you know, they're like, I got my start from you. And the owners are like, Colleen, you did a great job raising them up. And it's like, that is the best gift to me, worth more than $1 million, because I know I started them off right.
Absolutely, it's very inspiring, Colleen. It's
Yeah.
well,
That, and the other thing is just really super, super good customer service. So customers saying, you know, you always did right and everything always fit. You were always on time. You know, I had never in all those years ever had a customer complaint. You know, those things are huge. People don't think about that.
right. Wow. So, do you still have companies today, or are you just primarily a business coach, or what's going on today with you, Colleen?
Well,
I
thank you
you
for
know,
asking. Thanks for asking. I am getting ready. Over the years, I started to sell some of those businesses, and they're still very successful, most of them. Um, but now, right now, I'm getting ready to launch two businesses. One, and they'll launch in the late spring of this year. One is going to be affiliate marketing. So I'll be selling products for others. So if you have a product that you would like me to check out, please let me know. And I'll let you know here in just a couple minutes where you can do that. And the other one is I'm going to be doing a health, wellness, and coaching, and then vetted and guaranteed products. So it's all going to be in the health and wellness space. And then I'll do some coaching on that. And doctors and wellness practitioners will do coaching as well. It's going to be a huge thing that'll be ongoing. We're going to give a lot away in the way of information in lots of categories, from infant to very elderly. And the products will be products that you can't buy in the stores. They'll be vetted and guaranteed, so you'll know that if it's something that it wasn't quite for you, that you can get your money back, which is something that you normally can't do in stores. So you're protected, and you'll know that I have personally vetted it and checked it out and feel it's a good product. So you'll feel comfortable in purchasing it if you so choose. You don't have to. And I'm very excited about it. Quite a few people in the health and wellness industry are very excited about this. And there's also a chance to be able to put your products on this site as well. So if you're interested or have a product or service that you might be interested in either one of those, please let me know. Or if you're a practitioner or doctor or holistic service provider, please let me know. And you can do that by going to Colleen Ladwig, just like you see on the screen, at gmail.com. So we made it really easy for you. So Colleen Ladwig at gmail.com. But we're very, very excited about it and would love to have you check it out here in a couple months when it's all set and ready. But you can contact me now if you are interested in knowing more about it or would like to have your product vetted.
you
So,
said, Colleen. I am putting it in the comments now.
oh,
Colleen
okay,
Ladwig
great. Yeah,
at
Colleen Ladwig at gmail.com.
Okay, that's simple enough. Email. So let's see.
Yep, that's
There we go.
perfect. Exactly.
Okay, so I know one thing that you were interested in. Our time is running down, unfortunately, but I know one thing you were interested in was stem cell therapy.
Oh, yes. Would you let me get a quick sip of water? I do have stem cell therapy, um, and they are in the form of patches that work from light. And so they're not harvesting it from placenta, and they aren't using other weird um, forms to do it. It is very, very safe. It's very good. And I have that available as well. And Dale has heard about it and knows about it. You can also get a hold of me about that through Dale or through me. I'm putting my link in. I'm hoping you're going to get to see it, or Dale can retype it for me. But it's lifewave.com slash.
Life is in.
Yeah, life. Or I put it wrong. I'm sorry. It's life, Live.
Oh,
Not
live.
live. Life, Life.
Oh, okay. Life.
Yeah,
Wave.
lifewave.com slash Colleen
Is that
Ladwig.
wave or is that WAVE
Wave,
or
WAVE
Okay. .com.
slash Colleen Ladwig.
Uh,
And they're really great. And they only cost, when you subscribe, like $5 a day. Now, normally stem cells are like $175,000 per shot. And only people with super wealthy incomes could afford it. And so now it's actually reasonable and able to be afforded by everyone, because at $5 a day, everyone can afford it. And you can live longer, be healthy, look and feel better. They're completely patented. They're done by scientists. You can actually make money with it if you choose to do so. You can share it. They are fantastic, and they're completely guaranteed. Most people find that it will stop pain within 1 day. Sometimes it takes a few more days than that, but I personally had instant results within 10 minutes. And a lot of people have, but I don't like telling people that it can be 10 minutes, because if you don't get it in 10 minutes, then you're like, well, I didn't get it in 10 minutes. Because they say 1 to 7 days, but most of the time you get it very quickly. And I highly, highly recommend these. And you can go right to my site at lifewave.com slash Colleen Ladwig. That's LIFEWAVE.com slash, and then Colleen Ladwig, my name, just like it's on the screen. And you'd want to get the X39. It's the X39 patch.
Okay.
But yeah,
Well,
it's phenomenal. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we have about 2 more minutes left. So we've covered a lot of ground in this interview. And thank you very much for your presence and your insights and everything. And you have a fascinating story. And I admire the way that you've overcome everything to not only your own issues, but also those of your loved ones. And it's very admirable. And yeah, how would you like to leave it? What would you like to leave us with today, Colleen?
Thank you so much. You are so awesome. You have overcome so much yourself, and I just want to put a special blessing on you.
I appreciate that.
You are so blessed, and I'm just now putting a special blessing on you and your heart.
I appreciate that, and I return the favor, even though I'm not used to passing out blessings. But everything is good, and let me. Okay, so okay, well, I think our time we have like less than a minute left, but thank you once again for appearing. And you said this was your first podcast or your first show, but
yes,
you came off very well, and you were professional and very interesting, and you have a fascinating story. And thank you very much, Colleen. And why don't we just say goodbye? If you want to say goodbye, feel free. And let me just do this. Get this video.